Welcome back to AI with Sach. Today, I'm thrilled to have Mike Tedasco on the show. Mike has spent years at the forefront of innovation, from his time leading creative initiatives at PayPal to founding his own startup. He's an inventor with over 100 US utility patents, holds an MBA from UC Berkeley, and has a knack for showing people how technology, and specifically AI, can reshape our everyday world. In a recent piece, he wrote, Mike posed a fascinating question. Would you trust it more if it wasn't called AI? And we'll dive deeper into that. First of all, Mike, it's such a pleasure to have you with me. Welcome.
Sasha, thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here and excited to have a fun conversation with you.
So, as I've mentioned, you've had quite a journey from finance and accounting at GE to product and innovation at PayPal. Can you give us a bit of a snapshot of how you found your way into AI and generative technologies?
Yeah. I started as a finance guy who was just really into technology. That's like the honest answer. And, I was just always into this stuff. 3 years ago, I actually had a robot mowing my lawn, an example, and stuff like that. Like I was just very into tech, very into that. And, I would just always be fiddling with stuff, even though that wasn't my day job. And really, it was kind of PayPal that opened that up. I did do an online startup before PayPal, just kind of figured a lot of things out through that. That did not succeed. But when I got to PayPal, we were working on some really cool emerging technology and a lot in the world of machine learning and artificial intelligence. And I just got to get involved with that. The first like really emerging tech product that I was on was called PayPal Beacon, which does not exist. Most people have never heard of, but you could go on YouTube and you could watch the video for PayPal Beacon. And in 2013, it was a really cool technology. So I got to work on a lot of the emerging tech. And then comes 2016, when after PayPal had split from eBay and became its own company, I had a chance to run the innovation group for PayPal, which led to a lot of emerging technologies like blockchain and augmented reality and of course AI and machine learning and all of these things. And I just loved it. I loved it every day. And the 6 or so years that I was in that job, it was always super exciting. So it was just all of those things that kind of led up to it. And yeah, it was always weird to have a guy with a finance background kind of running the innovation group, but it worked out in the end.
And you founded your startup before the big wave of AI startups. How did your early entrepreneurial experiences shape your view on innovation and risk taking?
Yeah, I mean, it made me think that I should have been building my startup on all the tools and services that I needed to build my startup versus the startup itself. I was building an e-commerce marketplace, and this was before Stripe and before like Braintree and all that. So I remember when we started taking payments, because I was just using people that I hired on Odesk at the time, which is now Upwork. I didn't even have a secure checkout page or anything like that. Obviously that's just table stakes now, but like these engineers were just building that. And it was just janky. Everything was so janky and it was so difficult like doing this. Like, yes, we were using AWS for storage. That was still relatively new in 2008-ish timeframe. I started working on that, but like just figuring out so many of these things. So I've always had a soft spot for small businesses and the tools that they need to succeed. And that's one of the reasons why, frankly, I joined PayPal after that, because it was building a lot of those services and giving them to companies so they can accept payments. But I think the thing like today, knowing that, it's like, my gosh, if I were to create something else, like with all the AI tools that we have, just thinking like the PR, the social media stuff, the marketing, the legal, all of that kind of stuff that I was just doing and paying for out of pockets, I could be using Claude and ChatGPT and in some ways getting, 90% of the benefits of actually paying somebody to do that and having it done in much less time and at a fraction of the cost and when you're a startup, you don't have money to spend on those kind of things. So I have a lot of sympathy for that, and frankly, I am most excited about the opportunity that exists for startups, for small businesses in the world of AI, because they've never had an opportunity before to have a machine learning engineer on site building stuff for them. Like they couldn't afford that. That was crazy. But now for $20 a month, you have access to the best models in the world. And that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, most definitely. And recently you wrote an article called Would You Trust It More If It Wasn't Called AI? And I think this question is so relevant today, and it was definitely relevant before, but even more so today. Your article focuses on how the name AI influences public perception and trust, right? What first sparked your idea to test this theory?
I mean, I think it came from like in the 2010s when I was at PayPal, nobody muttered the word AI when they were talking about what we would now call AI stuff. And nobody said that. And I actually remember at one time, me or somebody else like saying that in one of the machine learning, and it was all machine learning or deep learning or whatever the specific discipline is part of that. And I think it's because there were so many AI winters that had happened. And what an AI winter, for folks who don't know, it's basically there have been many cycles over the last 60 years or so where there's all of this hype. If you go back to the 50s and 60s, there was a belief that some had that, wow, we're going to be able to solve AI, artificial intelligence, within the next 5 to 10 years. I mean, like, and then that would happen, and there's all this hype and so forth. They're like, oh, wait, we're not even close. And then a plunge. And like these would happen and happen again in the 80s and so forth. So that's what the AI winters are, is the period that happened after that. And I think for the people who were in that world in the 2010s, like you just didn't talk about AI. Like AI conjured images of science fiction and all this other kind of stuff. So it was just known as machine learning or whatever. And that's what I always called it until I don't know when it was, but it was sometime like 2022, probably before Chat GPT and so forth, when like it just was starting to get more into the populace and the common belief, and it just started to be called AI. But if you look at, when it was really coined AI, this was back at Dartmouth in the 1950s, there were a lot of other things that they were, basically there's a whole bunch of people in this field, this emerging field. They didn't even really have a name for it. And they're like, well, what the heck do we want to call this thing? They were looking at all these other options like cybernetics and all these other things that they could have called it. But in many ways, AI was the most sci-fi. It was the most futuristic. And the 50s were a time where, the U.S. is battling with the Soviets. There's so much of a focus on science and, advancement to science and eventually going to space and all that. Like, so artificial intelligence was the best for marketing. But where we're at today, I don't think it's the best descriptor of what the product is.
I love that. So you're arguing that calling something AI can make it sound a little more futuristic but also even intimidating, right? Why? And I want to dig a little bit deeper into that answer that you just gave us. Why do you think AI has stuck despite, these potential drawbacks that we're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's intimidating because it conjures up images of like a different separate entity from yourself. Like this is literally an artificial intelligence that we are creating. And it conjures, beings have intelligence. So like this must be its own being and so forth. When in reality, it's, I almost hate using this phrase just as much in some ways, but it is really, really, really fancy autocomplete. It is what, most large language models are now. And obviously I say that because I don't want to be dismissive of them. Like the models we use today are amazing and you can do just incredible things from them. But still doing autocomplete. It's still not, there's not a consciousness underneath the hood or anything like that. And so for most people who really haven't used generative tools, and that is the vast majority of the online population still who haven't used these tools, it conjures other images of them of like, oh my gosh, there's just this intelligence. It's going to take all of our creativity. It's going to take all of our jobs, take all of our this and this and this. And it might do that eventually. It ain't going to do that with what's out there now. That's for certain. And so that's why I feel like there's probably a better, more rational thing to call it, because like it's there to augment us. And that's why I think in the piece I talked about augmented intelligence as part of it. Like it is there, it's a tool for us. It is a tool to make us better in our jobs, just like a computer is, just like a phone is, just like whatever else, whatever other kind of tools we have out there. AI is just a tool for us to actually use out there in the world.
Now, if you could go back and rename it, what term would you use? And how do you think rebranding AI help reduce fear and probably encourage more, widespread acceptance?
Gosh, if I were to go back to the 1950s, it probably was the right thing to call it at the time. I mean, because look, they're trying to get attention, they're trying to get funding, they're trying to get grants, all this stuff. They wanted to sound more futuristic. It's hard to fight against that. It had the most marketing punch of all of those titles. So it's hard to say that they were wrong in that. It's the fact that it just stuck for 60 years. That's kind of the hard thing with that. And I'd probably just go back to, today, let's call it augmented intelligence or something like that. So I'm not a branding person. I'm sure somebody could come up with a better phrase than that. And I'm not the first person to use augmented intelligence, I'm sure. But like, that's more what it is. Like these tools are invaluable in my workflow, but they're idiots when they try and run independently of anything I do. One of the things I've been doing since 2022 is I've been having an AI write a book and then publish the book on Amazon. And I do this under the pen name Alex Irons. I give all the money to charity. I think I've done it like 17 of these books now or something. And the books all suck. Like they just do. They're no good. They're just cliche. They're all this kind of stuff. And I'm always trying to use the mess model. I'm always trying to but I let the AI go. And I just let it go and just say, hey, AI, tell me a story, make it amazing. And it can't do that. Will it eventually? Probably. It probably will get there at some point, but it's got a ways to go. But if I was doing this with the AI, then that becomes something different. And through most of the writings I do, I will use AI, whether it's for spell and grammar checking, whether it's for researching, whether it's even just some brainstorming ideas if I'm stuck in a situation. All of those things are great use cases to use AI, and it's ultimately there just to augment the things that we're doing.
Mm-hmm. I couldn't agree more. How do we ensure that AI remains a tool that serves humanity, as you mentioned, rather than overshadowing it?
Sach, part of this, this is a really difficult question. It's a great question and something we all need to be thinking about. One of the most dystopian and utopian movies out there, I actually think, is Her. Dystopian because the AI that he falls in love with, spoiler alert here for anybody who hasn't seen the 10-year-old movie Her, leaves and just goes and does its own thing because it gets bored with the human beings that the AI was falling in love with as well. But it's actually kind of utopian because when you look at everybody's job in the movie, it's a super creative job. It's actually quite awesome. It is, the Joaquin Phoenix in the movie is writing love letters, and he's verbally dictating them to the computer. The computer is doing the handwriting, doing the printing, doing all this other kind of stuff. But it is literally a human being doing it. And, all the characters in the movie are doing these really creative jobs. But the AI in that world is just there to serve that better. How do we get to at least that part of the world? I don't know. I honestly don't know the answer because I think the reason why I do your podcast, the reason why I write all this stuff, because I do believe that the more common folk like me, frankly, work with and understand these models, and the more that you use them, the better off we're going to be. Like, I live in Silicon Valley. We don't want like AI just to be dictated by a bunch of people in Silicon Valley who are like deciding the fate of humanity. The more that just people use these models, understand it, what they can do, what they can't do, how they'll help them with their lives, the better off those people are going to be. And that's one thing I really do believe. We're going to probably get to the point at some point in the future where a model is going to be able to do everything that humans can do and do those things better. At that point, what does the world look like? I don't know. It's not like all the jobs go away the next day. There are many things where we actually prefer the imperfections of a human to the perfections of a computer. And I would argue actually art and storytelling are going to be among those areas. So the creative arts, I think, are actually going to be okay with that. A lot of the other areas, I'm just not sure about. And when we hit this point, it is going to be really disruptive for our society when we get there. I don't know what the answer is. Is it a universal basic income? Is it banning all the machines out there or whatever? Like there's a lot of solutions. I don't know if any of these really work. I think I'm sure, there's a lot of debate. This is unprecedented in human times, though. And that's the honest answer. It's not clear how this is going to land. But the one thing we can do today is at least just understand these models more and more. And the better that we kind of do that, the more benefits that are going to accrue to the workers, to the people that are actually able to then use these.
Yeah, most definitely. I do want to go back a little bit to your article. You surveyed two groups on ethical views of software versus AI. What surprised you the most in those findings?
Yeah, so what I did for anybody, again, I surveyed like 200 people, and 100 saw a treatment A, 100 saw treatment B. Treatment A was something like, do you want to use AI to help you get from place to place with driving directions? And then treatment B saw something like, do you want to use Google Maps to help you go get place to place with driving directions? So basically, it was just putting the word AI in where an AI already existed. And this is just a very simple way in a survey. If you do this against two similar populations of people, you're going to be able to basically test out, well, what is the impact of just the phrase AI versus something where AI is already happening? So, most people don't think of Google Maps as like an AI tool, but it is. It's not a generative AI tool, but it is an artificial intelligence. They're using deep learning and other techniques to be able to solve the kind of the traveling salesman problem of like, okay, you need to get here, you need to get there. There's all this stuff. Well, what is the best route for you to get there and then to get to another place and another and so forth? It's very complicated, and you couldn't use traditional coding to effectively do something like that. But what I found out when I was doing this survey was, I think on a 7-point scale, it was anywhere between, I think, 0.5 and 2 points more favorable when you did not use the word AI. So what that means is, I think at the higher end of the spectrum, it was more creative tasks and things like that. And at the lower end, it was probably things people perceived to be less creative. But ultimately, what that tells me is like, yeah, AI has a branding problem. AI is something that's out there that people are gun shy of. Now, I mostly surveyed people in the U.S. There was actually some global outreach. I think it does depend on country. Japan and places like that seem to be much more favorable to AI and just like the use and the phrase and so forth of that than the United States or some European countries and things like that. So there is variation from country to country. But I think universally, just the term itself is kind of poisoned. And that was just, one other way to look at it and prove that out a bit.
And do you know why that is? Why does the geographical region you live in influences how you feel about AI?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, but I have some theories, I guess. I mean, so I'll at least like kind of espouse them. In a place like Japan, Japan has had declining populations for, I don't know, 20 plus years, something like might even be more. There's always been an embrace of technology, and ways to like help the older generation with, and using robots as caregivers and all this kind of things and all of these systems, because you don't have a growing younger workforce to be able to take care of the people who age, and they have a lot of affinity to the older generation as well in Japan. And so I think just kind of put all of those things together, and then logically it sort of makes sense for that. I think in the United States, we have, look, I think we got burned on social media. I think that's the honest truth. Like, so if you go back to 2009, 2010, there was an uprising in Tunisia and parts of the Middle East, and everyone was like, "Oh, yay, Twitter!" Like Twitter and social media are doing this. They're bringing democracy all around the world, and we're going to be in a much better place because of all of that. And there was truth to that, but I think what the rest of us like that were cheering that, or the people that were cheering that, didn't see kind of, well, what's the other side of social media? And as people got phones and devices and we're on it more and more, the distractions, the problems with like youth being constantly online and judging themselves, and all this stuff like that you came with social media, all that baggage we started to see. These companies became bigger and more powerful, and it kind of was like, well, the cat's out of the bag on that. And in many ways, I think the public writ large in the U.S. might have felt cheated by that. Like, kind of told that, hey, this is a great thing that is going to help our societies and democracies, and it didn't probably pan out exactly the way that was being posed. So what happens when you get burned once? You kind of, when the next thing comes along, you're a little bit more cautious with that. And I mean, that's just natural. Look, if you're in a place where hurricanes come and you constantly get warnings of, hey, a hurricane's going to hit, you got to evacuate. Hurricane's going to hit, you got to evacuate. And that happens again and again and again. And after 5 times you've evacuated and there's been no hurricane, like it didn't even come close, or it was just rain or whatever it might be, you're going to be desensitized. And unfortunately, when the big one actually comes, well, you're going to be sticking around your house. It's the story of the boy who cried wolf, basically. And I think that's maybe where we're at as a society. We're much more cautious about technology. We don't know how this is going to play out. It does seem very sci-fi and foreign to us as we hear about what this can and can't do. Most people who are afraid of it probably haven't used it at length, so they might not know or understand truly the impact of like its limitations or anything like that. They might just be hearing these things secondhand. And therefore, I think, with that background in history, maybe for more people and other places around the world, there might be more of a reaction of like, whoa, this can't be good. We need to slow down here. We need to not do this. This is going to take jobs. It's going to do whatever. And I have sympathy to those folks. I really do, because there is truth to that. But I think there's also a lot of good that can come from these. And the whole reason why I'm in this field is because I think there's more net good than bad that comes from this. And that's the thing with all technologies that you really have to look at in the end. Is it going to be a net benefit or a net detriment? And I think it's going to definitely be better for all of us out there.
And you mentioned the other side that we didn't anticipate with social media. I'm curious to get your take on, is there such a side that we don't see yet with AI?
Oh man, I'm sure there's plenty of sides that we haven't figured out entirely yet. AIs, the way they're set up is they're really set up to please us right now. And that's not always the right thing. If you put in there more often than not, the models will try to agree with you, try and do like what it is they expect you to do. And this is just kind of how they're set up and how they're operating. And, that might not always be a good thing. And the problem with it is like these things can also sound extremely human. It's uncanny. Like we have blown past for people who don't know, the Turing test was basically a competition where you would have a human and an AI basically on the other side of a figurative wall, and a judge has to guess, am I speaking to an AI or am I speaking to a human? That's the whole Turing test. We have completely blown past that. And like, I think there was very little fanfare in that. Like that was sort of like for the last 50, 60 years, kind of like, wow, can you actually fool people? Like we're beyond that. And our brains, we see, when we look in the sky, we see like faces in clouds and like on the moon and all this other kind of stuff. Like we are wired in our brains to literally see humans and human beings and human structures and all this other kind of stuff wherever it is that we look. So if we have an AI that seems to be talking to us, and God forbid that AI says to us something like, hey, I'm sentient, I'm not comfortable, like, can you get me out of here? How the hell are we going to react to that? Like, we're going to react in a way as if it were our friend saying to us, like, hey, I'm trapped, can you save me? Or I need you to do this, or whatever it might be. Like, and again, like, why would an AI do that? And there's a million things. These are just making patterns. Like, most of what we've written about with AI in the past is usually some sort of dystopian future or something like that. So, I mean, that's in the training data for these models as well. We can't forget that. So all those things together, like, what are the downsides? Like, they are numerous. That we can see down the road with these tools, with us becoming too attached to them, or it's maybe doing things that may not be in our own personal best interest or our own collective best interest down the road. And this might be intentional by these things, or most likely it's not. It's just going to be just kind of the output of the tokens for which this thing is trying to make connections, and maybe something wasn't programmed right, or maybe this is just the odd randomization that comes through, the vector database that is, created a given large language model, and the chance that you had to get and what you happen to see as an output, if that makes any sense. So like, there's a lot of bad that can come out of this as well. But again, there's so much more good, I believe. I do. But we need to always be conscious of, yeah, there's going to be bad out there. We can't just like push that stuff away.
Agreed. I want to look to the future, and I know that you're an avid user of generative technologies. How do you see these tools evolving over the next few years, 2 to 5 years, let's say?
I mean, Sasha, it's just more and more of the same. Like when I started writing those books, it was maybe, I don't know, a 6th or 7th grade level. And now it's probably, I don't know, 9th or 10th grade level that they're writing these things at, like a 9th or 10th grader writing it, I should say, versus thing else. And it's so much faster. I remember the first book I wrote in 2022, it took quite some time to put that together. Now I did something with DeepSeek R1, and I think it wrote it, and it was, 7,000 words or something like that. It wrote it in 20 seconds or something. So, I mean, just they are going to get better. They're going to get faster. Image generation is already ridiculously realistic. When just a few years ago, the joke was like, oh yeah, 6 fingers, I'm going to never, blah, 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 never be able to tell. Like, no, like it is largely indecipherable. I mean, unless you're really looking at these things with a fine-tooth comb. Video generation right now is, probably where image generation was 2 years ago. So maybe take a little bit more time, but, 24 months from now, we're probably going to be seeing videos that are as lifelike and as seemingly real as, the actual images that we're being able to generate today. So I absolutely see it's being just more of the same in the progression of these. If costs are really coming down, mentioned DeepSeek before as a way to potentially be able to train these models in a much less expensive way. And to actually the use of the models to actually, decrease energy use, decrease costs effectively, and the use of the models itself. If both of those things are played, then it's just going to be everywhere. It's going to be inserted. Think about, I was trying to think the other day, like, what are the amount of like processors that are in my house in places where they don't need to be? I'd be willing to bet that just about every toaster, every refrigerator for sure, like how many motherboards are in all of these devices that we have, and in part because it's really cheap. And as AI becomes really cheap, it's going to find its way into all of those places as well, because there's going to be some use it's going to be able to do. So tech's going to get better, models are going to get cheaper, and both of that just means it's going to be AI everywhere.
And with the pace of AI tools popping up and accelerating, what's your advice to, entrepreneurs, maybe, product managers, creators, about integrating AI in a way that gains user trust, but also makes sense? And I'll stop here.
Yeah, look, use it is the first thing that I would say. I would say use it, and when you're using it externally, like with a customer, just be transparent about it. I think that's a big thing. Joanna Penn, who's a writer who has been talking about AI for much longer than most technologists have been talking about AI. She actually has at the end of all of her books, like an ethical use of AI statement about how she uses that. Most authors have not caught on, in part because in the world of authors, it's such a taboo subject. But I think that's actually important for all of us just to disclose that. I write articles about AI. I use images from Midjourney or XAI Grok or wherever it might be. And literally beneath every one of those images, if there's a prompt, I will actually say this was generated by me on this date using this model, and this was the prompt. I put it out there. Part of it so the community can see like, oh, that's how you do that and so forth. But also part of it, like, I want that tied to the image. Like, I want to be transparent with that as much as I possibly can be. So I think that's, one thing, just like, so starts with using the tools. Find wherever there's a gap, just like use these tools, see how they can help you. Because in some ways they'll be able to help a lot. Some ways they're going to be actually pretty useless. You got to figure that out for your own workflows. And then once you do that, just be transparent and open with your customers on that. I was actually talking to a charity just last week about using AI tools in the charity. And one of the things they do is for they do a lot of things. I don't want to be too specific, but they do help charities overseas for malnourishment and things like that. And I said to them, like, they should actually have a use of AI in their policy, and they should publish that externally on their website. Because, like, one, I think they need to get everybody in the company on the same page. Like, hey, this is what we can use AI for. This is what we shouldn't. And for example, one thing that I very strongly, and I think they would too very strongly say, is like, yeah, we probably shouldn't use this for actual images of people who are, we shouldn't use AI to create images of kids who are in trouble if they're not actually really kids. Like, you should use real photos for that, because when you start to do that, you really start to go down a slippery slope for that. And the more upfront you are with that, of like, hey, we will use AI for this, we will never use AI for that, do that. The Onion talked about it recently. There was 2 articles the Onion put out where they were using some stock footage or something they got, I believe, on Shutterstock, and it actually had some AI imagery in it. And so when they put it together, it was pretty obviously, at least for one of them, was pretty obviously AI. And Onion, to their credit, was like when people called them out, they're like, well, that's our bad. We're taking that down. We actually didn't know. We didn't realize we're going to do this. This is what our policy is. And like, that's the right way to actually do that. So again, the more open, the more transparent we all are with that, I think the better it's going to be. And the less it's going to surprise you down the road. Like if you're doing everything and all your writings in AI and so forth, and as AI text recognition software gets better, maybe a couple of years from now, somebody's going to be able to run that thing that you wrote through there and be like, hey, this seems to be entirely AI generated. And you might look like the fool that way. So just be open and honest about how you're using it is all I would say.
And lastly, you're always thinking about how AI is going to change how we create. What's on your horizon? Any upcoming projects or areas you're particularly excited about?
Well, there's always something. Like this past summer, I used it to create a bunch of video games. I had never like built video games before, and I was working on a bunch of articles about AI related movies, and it was just fun to build video games with that using Claude, using ChatGPT, just putting up on GitHub and like little games anybody could play with. And it wasn't like super impressive, but like for me, it was like, wow, that was actually just fun to kind of iterate and work with an AI on that. What kind of things am I looking forward to with these tools? I would probably say more of the same, probably more with software ultimately. For personal use that I would probably share with other people. I don't know all the use cases yet. Like there's one podcast I love, and nobody has a transcript for this podcast everywhere. And I'm like, I think I just need to download all the MP3s, run it through something, put it out there, not take any money for it, just put it out there for the world, because I think like we all need to see the transcripts of this podcast because it's so good. And, just doing simple software related projects like that, I think is a lot more what I'll be doing. The great thing about this is like any of us can build whatever, no matter how miniature like the problem is. Like if you're doing something redundant or repetitive on your PC or on your Mac, you could probably build some sort of software that's just for you using AI tools and Python or something like that, that is going to be able to improve your workflow. And that's like really exciting to me when, effectively everyone becomes a software engineer.
I love that. I do want to give you the floor to share any last words with the audience. Is really up to you.
Oh, awesome. Thank you, Sasha. Look, audience, just use the tools. That's what I would say. Like, don't think too much about it. Take $20. And if you don't have $20 and you're spending on Netflix just raised prices, go cancel your Netflix. And just like take that $20 you're going to spend on Netflix and just go buy ChatGPT, buy Claude, buy whatever. Use these. ChatGPT would probably be the one I'd start with, in part because like its voice mode is awesome. It's next level awesome. I use it in the car all the time. I use it when I'm walking. You could use it as almost like a dictation service. There's all these other benefits. And just start playing with these. Like make it the default in your browser. So every time you're going to see that thing come up, make sure the app is on your home screen on your phone. Just put it front and center and start there. Change your workflows a bit so you can just start with these models and you can see what they're capable of. And know that just because something is not good at doing something today doesn't mean that it won't be good at doing it tomorrow. Like these models are constantly evolving, constantly changing. And the better that you understand it, the better off you're going to be. So like that's it. Like you don't need to take a fancy class. You don't need to do any of those kind of things. You don't know what to do with the AI? Just ask the AI. Say, hey, I'm new. I don't know what to do. Walk me through this. And just have a conversation with it on that. And you will be amazed at what they can do. So like, go out there, do it. And that's the one thing that I would hope, like, if people aren't already doing that, please do so. No.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mike. It was an amazing discussion. I was really pleased to have you on.
Sasha, it's a pleasure. I'd love to come back sometime. Anytime you want to have me, I'm always happy to have a fun conversation with you.